The phone call came at 4:47 p.m. on a Sunday, right in the middle of a federal fugitive transport going sideways in Memphis. "Chief Deputy Eddings, we have a problem." My deputy's voice was tight. "The prisoner just collapsed. Paramedics say possible heart attack. We are 10 minutes from the hospital, but the locals are talking about stopping the transport." I stood in my kitchen, still in my weekend jeans, holding a dish towel. Through the window, I could see my father's house 3 streets over, the place where I was supposed to be in 13 minutes for Sunday dinner, the place I'd been dreading for the past week. "Don't stop," I said. "Hospital protocol, full security detail. I don't care if he's coding. You don't break transport. Call the U.S. Attorney's Office. Get them on standby. If he dies in custody, we need every step documented." "Copy that, ma'am." I ended the call and looked at the clock. 4:49 p.m. I had 11 minutes to get to Dad's house, sit through 3 hours of thinly veiled contempt, and pretend I didn't notice when my older brother Justin compared his new lake house to my situation. My situation, that's what they called it. My 41-year-old life that didn't include a husband, children, or a house in the right neighborhood. My situation that involved renting a modest apartment near the federal courthouse and driving a 7-year-old Civic. My situation that paid $165,000 a year and commanded 18 deputy marshals across 3 states. But they didn't know that. They'd never asked. I arrived at 5:03 p.m., 3 minutes late, which meant my stepmother Belle would already be annoyed. Dad had married her 4 years after my mother died. I was 15. Justin was 17. Our younger sister Cameron was 12. Belle came with 2 kids of her own and a very specific vision of what success looked like. 26 years later, that vision still didn't include me. The house was the same 1970s ranch Dad had bought when I was born. Vinyl siding, narrow driveway, a carport instead of a garage. My brother's BMW sat in front, Cameron's Lexus SUV behind it. I parked my Civic on the street. Inside, the dining room already smelled like pot roast and something burning. The table was set with Dad's everyday dishes, the ones with the faded blue rim that had been there since Mom was alive. Vinyl tablecloth, mismatched chairs. The overhead light had 2 bulbs out, giving everything a dim, tired quality. "Elise?" Belle's voice was bright and false. "You made it! We were just saying we should start without you. Sorry. Work thing." I slid into my usual seat, the one at the end where the table wobbled if you leaned too hard. On a Sunday, my brother Justin was already halfway through his first beer. Must be nice to have such flexible hours. I smiled and said nothing. This was the game. They made assumptions. I let them. It was easier than explaining that U.S. Marshals didn't actually have flexible hours, that I'd worked 73 hours last week hunting a fugitive who'd skipped bail on federal weapons charges. Dad sat at the head of the table carving the pot roast with the same dull knife he'd been using for 30 years. He didn't look at me. Hadn't really looked at me in years. Not since I'd wasted my criminal justice degree on some government job instead of marrying Stephen Gilmore, whose father owned 3 car dealerships. "So," Belle said, passing the potatoes. "Justin has news." Justin grinned. "We closed on the lake house Friday. 6 bedrooms, 4 baths, private dock, built in 2019, so everything's new. Michelle's already planning the 4th of July party." "That's wonderful," I said, taking the smallest helping of potatoes possible. "What did you pay?" Dad asked. This was his favorite question, the one that let him quantify success in dollars and square footage. $475, Justin said. "Got them down from $490. Cash offer." Dad whistled low. "Cash? That's smart. No mortgage payment eating away at you." "Yeah, well." Justin glanced at me. Some of us planned ahead. The barb landed exactly where he'd aimed it. I took a sip of water and said nothing. Cameron jumped in, eager to play. "Tell them about the boat, Justin." "Oh, yeah." He pulled out his phone, started swiping through photos. 24-foot bell liner, used, but only 200 hours on it. Got it for a steal. $18,000. "Jesus," Dad breathed. "You're really doing it right, son." The words hung there. "You're really doing it right, son. Not you're doing well. Not I'm proud of you, but right," which implied there was a wrong way, a wrong son, a wrong daughter. "What about you, Cameron?" Belle asked. "How's the house hunting going?" Cameron launched into a detailed description of the 5 houses she and her husband were considering. Square footage, school districts, granite countertops versus quartz. I ate my pot roast and watched the clock tick toward 6 p.m., then 6:30. My phone buzzed. A text from my deputy. Prisoner stable in surgery. U.S. attorney on site. All documented. I texted back. Good work. Keep me posted. Elise, no phones at the table, Belle said sharply. I put the phone away. Sorry. Work must be a really important government job, Justin said. There was that tone again, the one that made government job sound like garbage collector. It pays the bills, I said mildly. Does it? Cameron asked. And there it was, the question they'd all been dancing around. Pay the bills. I mean, because you're still renting, right? I am. That apartment near downtown? She made a face. Elise, you're 41. Don't you think it's time to build some equity? Get on the property ladder. I cut my meat carefully. I'm comfortable where I am. Comfortable isn't ownership, Dad said. This was the first time he directly addressed me all dinner. Comfortable is what people say when they can't afford better. Something hot flared in my chest. I pushed it down. Dad's right, Justin said. Real wealth is in property. I've got the primary residence, the lake house, and I'm looking at an investment property in Colombia. That's how you build generational wealth. Generational wealth, I repeated. That's the goal. It should be everyone's goal, Belle said. Leaving something for your children, building something that lasts. I didn't mention that I had no children. I didn't mention that every family dinner for the past decade had included some variation of this conversation, some reminder that I was failing at the basic requirements of successful adulthood. I didn't mention that I'd stopped trying to date after my ex-fiancé had left me because, in his words, you care more about catching fugitives than building a life. Speaking of houses, Belle said, turning to her friend Lisa, who'd been invited for reasons that were never explained. Lisa, didn't you just get that new listing in Ashford Park? Lisa launched into real estate talk. Dad and Justin debated property values. Cameron showed more photos of potential houses on her phone. I ate green beans and thought about the $2.3 million in real estate I owned. $2.3 million. 12 properties across 3 states, 4 residential rentals, 2 commercial spaces, 6 investment properties I had bought at foreclosure auctions, using my law enforcement connections and knowledge of distressed assets. The portfolio I'd been building for 15 years, property by property, using money I'd saved by living modestly and investing aggressively. The portfolio no one in my family knew about because I'd learned early and painfully that telling them anything about my success only made things worse. At 7:15 p.m., Belle served dessert, store-bought apple pie with ice cream. My father's accountant, Richard Nesbitt, arrived for coffee. He'd been doing Dad's taxes for 20 years, had known me since I was in high school. Richard. Dad stood suddenly jovial. Right on time. Coffee's fresh. Richard settled into the chair across from me, accepted his coffee with 2 sugars. Good to see everyone. How's the family? Thriving, Dad said. And then, because he couldn't help himself, Justin just bought a lake house. $475,000 cash. Impressive, Richard said, and he meant it. He pulled out his phone. I actually wanted to talk to you about some property tax strategies for your rental. Dad doesn't have rentals, Justin said. He's got the house free and clear, but that's it. Right, Richard said absently, scrolling through something on his phone. I meant for planning purposes. You'd mentioned wanting to look at investment properties last year. Couldn't swing it, Dad said. His voice had gone tight. Taxes are killing me as it is. Can barely keep up with the maintenance on this place. This was a lie. Dad had a comfortable pension from the post office and no debt, but it was his favorite lie, the one that let him paint himself as financially struggling while his children succeeded around him. All his children except me. Well, Richard said, if you ever do want to build a real estate portfolio, I can show you how some of my other clients structure their holdings. Take the Walters family. They've got 8 properties now, all generating passive income. Or the Hendersons with their commercial spaces downtown. He looked up from his phone. Actually, speaking of impressive portfolios, I was just reviewing one this week that blew my mind. 12 properties across 3 states, All owned by 12 properties, Cameron interrupted. Who do you know with 12 properties? Actually, Richard said, and something in his voice made me go very still. It's someone at this table. The room shifted. Everyone looked at Justin. Wait, Justin said. I've got two, the primary and the lake house. Not you, Richard said. He was frowning now, scrolling faster through his phone. This is hold on. Let me check something. My father had gone very still. Richard, what are you talking about? I do taxes for several people in this room, Richard said slowly, and I just realized. He stopped, looked at his phone, looked at me. His face went pale. Oh my God, he whispered. What? Belle demanded. Richard's hand was shaking slightly. I need to check something. Hold on. He pulled up a different screen, typed something, stared at the results. Then he looked at me again, and this time there was something like shock in his eyes. Elise, he said carefully, I handle your taxes. You do, I said quietly, and I handle your father's taxes. You do? We never. You two have the same last name, but I never connected. He set down his phone like it might explode. Jesus Christ. Richard, what the hell is going on? My father's voice had gone sharp. Richard looked at Dad, then at me, then back at Dad. Sir, when was the last time you asked your daughter what she does for a living? She works for the government, Dad said. Some administrative thing. She's never been specific about it. Some administrative thing? Richard repeated. He laughed. A short, shocked bark. Sir, your daughter owns 12 properties in this town alone. 12. 4 residential rentals fully occupied, 2 commercial spaces leased to businesses, and 6 investment properties generating passive income. The words landed in the middle of the table like a grenade. No one moved. That's not possible, Justin said. It's very possible, Richard said. I've been doing her taxes for 8 years. I never made the connection that you were her father. My father was staring at me. 12 properties. Yes, I said. In this town. Yes, you're lying, Cameron said. Her voice was shrill. You drive a Civic. You rent an apartment. You can't even afford a house. I can, I said calmly. I choose not to live in one. This is, Justin said. He turned to Richard. You're confused. You've got the wrong person. Richard pulled up his phone, turned it toward my father. Sir, look, these are the property records, all under her name. The commercial space at 4th and Main, hers. The duplex on Riverside, hers. The old Morrison building that got renovated last year. She owns it. My father took the phone with shaking hands. I watched him scroll through the records, watched his face go from red to white to gray. The Morrison building, he whispered. That's worth about $1.2 million now. Richard said she bought it for $300,000 at foreclosure 7 years ago, renovated it, leased it to 3 businesses. But my father looked up at me. How? I bought my first property when I was 26, I said, a foreclosure, fixed it up, rented it out, used that income to buy the next one and the next one. I worked federal fugitive cases. I see distressed properties all the time. I learned how to spot value. You're a U.S. Marshal, Richard said. It wasn't a question. Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal, I corrected. I command the district office. 18 deputies, 3 state jurisdiction. Belle made a choking sound. Chief Deputy, my father repeated. His hand was on his chest now, clutching his shirt. You're the second highest ranking law enforcement position in the district, Richard finished. Jesus. I knew that title sounded familiar when I filed your W-2, but I never. He looked at my father. Sir, she makes more than most lawyers in this town. No, Cameron said. No, you're making this up. She rents an apartment. She drives a 7-year-old Civic. Because I don't care about cars, I said. My voice was level, calm, but underneath something was burning. I care about assets that appreciate. I care about cash flow. I care about building wealth quietly while people like you assume I'm failing. People like me. Cameron's voice went high. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, that for 15 years you've all assumed I was poor, struggling, living paycheck to paycheck in my little government job. And you never once asked. You never once said, hey, Elise, how's work? What do you actually do? Are you happy? You never told us, Justin said. I tried. My voice was rising now, that volcano feeling starting to erupt. I tried for years. Every time I got promoted, every time I closed a major case, every time I bought another property, I tried to tell you and you changed the subject, or made jokes about my flexible government hours, or reminded me I didn't have a husband or kids or a house in the right neighborhood. Elise, my father started. You want to know what I did last week? I stood up. I coordinated a multi-state manhunt for a fugitive who'd violated federal probation on weapons charges. I had 18 deputies, 6 local PD units, and 3 FBI agents under my command. We caught him after a 6-hour standoff. No shots fired, no injuries. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, I testified in federal court about a fugitive transport I supervised. Thursday, I reviewed property records for 4 potential investment purchases. Friday, I closed on a commercial property in Charleston that will net me $60,000 a year in rental income. The table was silent. And today, I continued, I got a call at 4:47 about a federal prisoner having a heart attack mid-transport. I gave orders to maintain security protocol and contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office while I was standing in my kitchen getting ready to come here, to come to this dinner where my brother would brag about his lake house and my father would look through me like I'm not even here. That's not, my father said weakly. It is. I was shaking now. You want to know what you said to my aunt at Christmas? She asked about me, and you said she's probably living in her car by now. I've stopped asking. My father's face went white. That's what you tell people, I said, that I'm probably living in my car. I didn't mean, yes, you did, my voice cracked. You've been ashamed of me for 20 years. Ashamed that I didn't marry Stephen Gilmore, ashamed that I chose law enforcement over a safe office job, ashamed that I don't have kids or a house in Ashford Park, or a husband who owns car dealerships. Elise, stop, Belle said. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I laughed and it came out harsh. I've spent 2 decades being invisible in this family, being the failure, the disappointment, and you know what? I'm done. You can't be serious. Cameron said, You're going to throw a tantrum because we didn't know you were secretly rich. It's not about the money. I said, It's about the fact that you didn't care enough to ask, that you built this entire narrative about me failing and you liked it. It made you feel better about yourselves. That's not true, Justin said, but his voice was uncertain. Isn't it? I looked at him. When's the last time you called me? When's the last time any of you asked how I was doing? Not the surface stuff. Really asked. No one answered. I picked up my purse. Richard, thanks for the accidental exposure. I appreciate it. Elise, wait. My father tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He slumped back into his chair, one hand still clutching his chest. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. Dad. Cameron was at his side. Dad, are you okay? He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. You own 12 properties. 14 now, I said. I closed on 2 more last month, one in Columbia, one in Charleston. But you're probably living in your car by now. He repeated the words like he couldn't believe he'd said them. I've stopped asking. I finished for him. Yeah, I heard you. I walked toward the door. Don't leave, my father said. His voice was weak, broken. Please, I'm sorry. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I said. There's a difference. I opened the door. Behind me, I could hear Belle calling for someone to get Dad water. Justin was saying something about calling a doctor. Cameron was crying. Richard caught my arm in the driveway. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think you're brilliant. What you've built, it's extraordinary. Thanks, I said. Are you really not coming back? I looked back at the house, the dim light through the windows, the silhouettes of my family scrambling around my father. 26 years of Sunday dinners, 26 years of being looked through, talked over, dismissed. I don't know, I said. Honestly, I really don't know. I didn't go back that night, or the next Sunday, or the one after that. My father called 16 times in the first week. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that started with apologies and ended with defensiveness. I'm sorry I said that about the car, but you have to understand you never told us anything. Cameron called twice, then sent a long text about how I was overreacting and making this about something it's not. Justin didn't call at all. Belle sent a card, an actual physical card addressed to Elise Eddings, Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal. Inside, she'd written, "We're very proud of your accomplishments. We hope you'll come to dinner soon." I put it in the recycling. 3 weeks after the dinner, Richard called me. "Your father asked me to reach out. He said he wants to see you. He says he's been reading about what U.S. Marshals actually do." He bought a book. "A book," I repeated, "about the history of the Marshal Service. He's been highlighting passages. I didn't know what to do with that information." "He also asked me to pull the property records for all 14 of your holdings," Richard continued. "He wanted to see them to understand what you'd built. He sat in my office for 2 hours just looking at the addresses, the valuations, the rental income, and then he cried. He cried. He said he'd failed you, that he'd spent 20 years looking at you and never seeing you. He asked me if it was too late. I was quiet for a long time. What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know," Richard said, "but that if anyone would know, it would be you. I went to see him 4 weeks after the dinner. He answered the door himself. He'd lost weight. His face was drawn, older. He looked at me like he was afraid I might disappear. 'Elise,' he said, 'thank you for coming.' We sat in the living room, the same room where I had played as a child, where Mom had read me stories, where I'd told my parents I wanted to go into law enforcement, and watched my father's face close off. 'I've been reading,' he said. He gestured to the coffee table. There were 3 books about the U.S. Marshal Service, all bristling with sticky notes. About what you do, about the Witness Protection Program, fugitive apprehension, federal prisoner transport. I didn't know." His voice broke. "I didn't know any of it. I tried to tell you," I said. "You did?" He nodded. "You did, and I didn't listen. I was too busy being disappointed that you weren't the daughter I'd imagined, the one who married Stephen Gilmore and had kids and lived in Ashford Park. Why did that matter so much to you?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because it's what I understood," he said finally. "It's the life I thought I wanted for myself and never got. Your mother and I, we were happy, but we struggled. Always struggled, and I wanted better for you kids. But my version of better was so narrow, so limited. You told people I was living in my car," I said. He flinched. I know. And I can't. There's no excuse for that. I was so wrapped up in my disappointment that I turned you into a cautionary tale. The daughter who wouldn't listen, who threw away opportunities, and it was easier to believe you were failing than to admit I didn't know anything about your life. You could have asked. I know. Tears were running down his face now. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to forgive him. Part of me wanted to fall into his arms and let 20 years of hurt dissolve in his apology. But another part of me, the part that had endured 2 decades of dismissal, of being invisible, of being the family failure, that part couldn't let it go. I don't know if I can come back to those dinners, I said quietly. I understand. I don't know if I can watch Justin brag about his lake house and listen to Cameron's real estate plans and pretend that we're all okay now just because you read some books. I understand, he said again. Do you? I leaned forward. Because I don't think you do. I don't think any of you understand what it's like to be looked through, to have people you love assume the worst about you and prefer it to the truth, to know that your own father would rather tell people you're living in your car than admit he doesn't know what you do for a living. You're right, he said. I don't understand that. And I can't fix 20 years in 4 weeks, but I want to try if you'll let me. I looked at this man who'd raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework, and walked me down the aisle at my failed engagement party. This man who'd also erased me bit by bit, year after year, until I was just a vague disappointment at the end of the table. I need time, I said finally. I'll wait, he said. However long you need. That was 8 months ago. I've had coffee with my father 3 times since then. Brief meetings, carefully structured. We talk about surface things, the weather, local news, his garden. Sometimes he asks careful questions about my work, and I answer them carefully. Justin sent an email 2 months ago. Subject line, I'm sorry. The body was one sentence. I should have asked about your life instead of assuming. I haven't responded. Cameron called last week. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I know you don't want to talk to us, but Mom's birthday is coming up, and it would mean a lot if you came. Just think about it. I won't go. Belle hasn't reached out again. The thing about revelations is that they don't fix anything. They just expose what was always there. My family spent 20 years preferring the story of my failure to the reality of my success, and when reality crashed into their Sunday dinner, they wanted me to forgive them immediately, to understand that they didn't mean it, that it was all a misunderstanding, that we could move forward. But I can't. Maybe that makes me unforgiving. Maybe it makes me bitter. Maybe in some other version of this story, I would have taken my father's apology and rebuilt our relationship into something beautiful and redemptive. But this isn't that story. This is the story of a woman who realized at 41 that she'd been begging for scraps of recognition from people who would never see her, who'd built an empire in the shadows, because the people who were supposed to love her preferred her invisible. And when the light finally shone on what she'd accomplished, they clutched their chests and cried and said they were sorry. But sorry doesn't erase 20 years. Sorry doesn't give me back the dinners where I sat in silence while they celebrated everyone else. Sorry doesn't undo. She's probably living in her car by now. So I've made my peace with it. I go to work. I command my deputies. I close cases and buy properties and build the life I want. And on Sunday nights, when I know they're all gathered around that table with the vinyl tablecloth and the dim lighting, I'm somewhere else. I'm in my apartment that I choose to rent. I'm driving my Civic that runs perfectly fine. I'm looking at property listings for my 15th investment.